So New Brunswick, as you saw there, it has started to ease some restrictions because it's one of the lowest COVID-19 case counts in the country. There were only 2 active cases at last check, and it hasn't reported a new case in nearly a week now. The province is in phase 2 of its recovery plan, and Premier Blaine Higgs is the Premier of New Brunswick, and he's in Fredericton. Good to see you, Premier.
Good evening, Rosemary.
So we're all very jealous of how New Brunswick has done this. Where are you at now? Are there any active cases right now?
We have 2 cases, both confirmed to be travel related, and that's been that way for the last roughly a week.
So how do you explain the success of New Brunswick?
Well, I guess, we got into this early, as I've made previous comments about our Minister of Education was very proactive in identifying kind of a world issue that was coming our way, given his kind of in-depth knowledge in that field. Mm-hmm. We reacted quickly with school closures. After March break, we didn't let kids that were traveling, some in Italy that came back and said, you can't come to our schools. And then we shut down the schools right after March break. And we then proceeded to shut down activities within the province very quickly, and then started watching our borders diligently.
So you are now already in phase 2 of reopening, which again, I think makes a lot of people envious of where you're at. How is that going? Because I think now you've got some restaurants open, you've got some daycares open. How are people doing adapting to this living with COVID, but being able to do some normal things too?
Well, so far so good, and mind you, it was like flicking a switch when last Friday when we announced a change into phase 2, and all of a sudden you saw more activity within the cities, on the highways, but we're finding and what has been a success to date, not only certainly in all, all the first line workers, but in relation to the actual citizens and business owners that have been very compliant, very diligent about the social distancing, the washing hands, the preparation of the facilities. So we're expecting that same thing during the retail openings. And thus far, if we continue the way we have been, and the diligence continues, I'm confident that we can continue on this path within our own province at this point. Because first is having the movement within our own province. So
you've said that a couple times, and those 2 cases, as you said, were travel related. I know you've got some very strong feelings about your borders. So let's talk first of all about what that means for travel for Canadians or neighbors in Canada who want to come to New Brunswick in the months ahead. Is that on the table at all?
Well, if we talk in the months ahead, then possibly, but in the weeks ahead, no, it isn't possible. We are doing essential travel only. We know businesses, there will be contracts, there will be activities economically that will happen. Essential services have been happening and will continue, but the coming for visitation, the coming for non-essential, we'll continue to stop cars at the border, understand where and why you're coming. We have traffic that moves through our province en route to PEI or en route to Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. So we would continue to allow that, but we need to know that travel is very much understood and it's very much controlled, because we don't want to lose where we are, and we know how quickly it could all be lost.
Well, and I'm thinking of the other big border that you share too, and that of course is with the United States. And I know as many as 200,000 Americans travel through various points at New Brunswick, and we all know what's happening in the United States. It continues to be a troubling spot. How worried are you about the Canada-US border? What have you told your fellow premiers or the Prime Minister about that?
So we've been, certainly I've been very clear, and I think it's generally the agreement across the country that we want to have a border of security between us and the United States, other than commercial traffic, and we've had that. I think our border traffic may be down at one of our main ports of entry by down by about 80%. So but commercial traffic is still moving, supplies and goods are still moving, and they'll continue, and they must. But to have the routine, tourism traffic is going to be a big loss this summer. We know that. So we're working with local provinces, what can we do? And as they, ramp up, and as they have similar categories of the health concerns that we have and of the same conditions, then maybe we can work together more closely.
So what does that mean? You could maybe bubble with another province potentially, and someone could come there for summer holidays?
Yeah, that's right. We could, and that bubbling thing has worked out very well, and it has allowed some social interaction between families. A little tense when you have more than two or three siblings, and you got to pick one. But in my case, it was okay. I only had one daughter that's living in the province and was a grandchild, so that worked. But it gets to be a little tense in that sense. But with another province, I've had discussions with then the Premier King of PEI. Today we had a call with the other Atlantic premiers talking about timing and all that. It'll be a few weeks out, 2 months, I would say, into probably at the end of June, July.
All right, well, that's something for everyone to look forward to. Just as other parts of the country, not as far along as New Brunswick is, watch you and are hearing you talk about crazy things like going to restaurants, what would you say to other Canadians as they are sort of struggling to hang on to these still some fairly tough restrictions in many parts of the country?
Well, there certainly is hope, and there will be life after COVID. It'll be a little different, but we're blessed here in the Maritimes and in New Brunswick. We don't have the big cities to contend with, like in Quebec with Montreal and in Toronto and Ontario. It's a different scenario. So we're able to manage in a different way. But we will survive this, and I am convinced that our country is going to come out of this stronger and more united. I see it in our own province. I see us looking at areas of like food security and a national interest of how we support one another. Interprovincial trade, which has only been talked about in the last number of years, I think will become much more of a reality and a necessity, because I think people want Canada to be stronger.
All right, Premier, good words to leave it on. Thank you so much. And again, good luck to everyone in New Brunswick. Let them know that we're envious and hoping it all works out there as well.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
All right.